Howard Beckett, Executive Vice President of Operations, didn't open the meeting by welcoming anyone. He opened it by ending me. "We'll keep this efficient," he said, tapping the table once, not for order for authority. After reviewing direction, the board has decided to remove Vera Collins from her operational role, effective immediately. No context, no build-up, just the execution. Delivered in a voice trained to sound neutral while doing damage. Around the table, board members shifted in their chairs, eyes carefully avoiding mine. Silence followed, not confusion, but compliance, just to set the context clearly. Some details in the story you're about to hear are fictionalized and enhanced with the help of AI for storytelling and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people or companies is purely coincidental. If this kind of content isn't for you, feel free to step away, rest a bit, and take care of yourself. Howard continued, "This isn't about performance. It's about evolution. The company needs to move faster, adapt quicker. Some structures that worked before are no longer appropriate." I was sitting right there, still. He spoke as if I were already gone. Then came the pivot he had rehearsed. "Lucas Beckett has shown a forward-looking approach," Howard said smoothly. "More agile, more aligned with where the market is headed. The board believes new energy at the helm will accelerate progress." New energy. That was his son. I was the old weight. Apparently, the legacy problem. Never mind that every operational pipeline, every risk buffer, every compliance safeguard keeping this company alive existed because I built them. Never mind that when projects caught fire, I was the one they called quietly, urgently, and always off the record. None of that was mentioned. Humiliation doesn't explode. It tightens. It compresses. It sits in your chest while you realize the story about you has already been told, and you were never invited to correct it. I watched Lucas avoid my eyes, already sitting straighter, already stepping into something he didn't understand. I watched Howard wear the calm confidence of a man who thought control meant victory. I could have spoken. I could have dismantled their assumptions in minutes. Instead, I chose restraint. I met Howard's gaze and said one sentence. "Then I won't stand in the way. Just a quick moment, hope you're feeling well and remembering to put your health first, including those routine checkups we all postpone. Where are you listening from right now if you'd like to stay with this story? Subscribing helps us continue together, because the silence in that room was only the beginning. Sitting alone at my desk after the meeting, I replayed the years they now spoke of as outdated. I remembered the quarter when 2 clients threatened to walk. Contracts, bleeding clauses, no one else understood. I stayed. I rewrote terms, stabilized delivery, and built safeguards that kept regulators quiet and revenue intact when systems failed. I didn't give speeches, I fixed them. Howard Beckett never fixed anything. He narrated in meetings. He summarized other people's work with elegant phrases and perfect timing. He spoke fluently about momentum and vision, while quietly outsourcing the hard thinking to those beneath him. When a crisis passed, he claimed foresight. When it lingered, he reframed it as necessary turbulence. The board loved him for that. Lucas learned quickly. His version of reform arrived with slides, not substance. He removed verification steps I had added after near misses, calling them friction. He merged review stages to move faster, ignoring why they existed. Each shortcut was presented as innovation, each warning as resistance. I watched him smile through explanations that sounded convincing until you knew what had been cut. What stung wasn't disagreement. It was erasure. A week later, I opened the shared archive to prepare a transition brief. My folders were still there, the frameworks were still running, but my name was gone. Reports I had authored now carried neutral labels. Risk memos were attributed to departments, not people. My contributions had been sanded down into anonymity. That was the moment clarity replaced bitterness. They weren't replacing my work. They were rewriting ownership, and if my name could disappear that cleanly, so could their protection when the truth finally resurfaced. I closed the file calmly, understanding exactly how deliberate this had always been. The morning I resigned felt strangely quiet, as if the building had already adjusted to my absence. I walked into Howard Beckett's office with my letter folded once. Clean and final. No accusations, no demands. Just a decision. I placed it on his desk and said, "I'm submitting my resignation. Effective today." Howard looked at the paper, then at me, and smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed pressure had finally worked. "I think this is for the best." He replied evenly, "The board will appreciate a smooth transition." There was relief in his voice, disguised as professionalism. To him, this was victory without resistance. I didn't argue. I didn't mention contracts, risks, or the system still running because I had designed them that way. Silence was more efficient. Howard filled it himself. "We'll make sure your exit is handled discreetly," he added, already standing. No need to complicate things. HR was waiting in the conference room. She read the letter without expression, signed once, and slid it back across the table. No questions, no commentary. Her pen paused for half a second, then moved on, as if approving a routine expense. That pause told me everything. By noon, my access was scheduled to expire. I cleared my desk methodically, copying nothing, deleting nothing. The work remained exactly where it belonged. Howard passed by once, nodding as if generosity were his final gesture. He thought the story ended there. It didn't. That afternoon, my phone vibrated with a number I recognized. Clara Whitmore, director at an independent audit firm I had quietly advised years earlier. "We heard you're available," she said. "We're reviewing an operations structure you know well." I didn't hesitate. "Send the agreement," I replied, as I walked out for the last time. Badge surrendered, posture steady. I understood the difference between leaving and losing. Howard believed he had removed a problem. What he actually did was move me to a position where facts could no longer be managed, only revealed. And that distinction would soon become painfully clear. And here's the part most viewers don't know. Working outside the company changed the way everything looked. From my new seat, there was no hierarchy, no politics, only documents and outcomes. I logged in under a neutral credential and pulled the full operational dataset. Untouched by internal edits, patterns emerged immediately. The systems were still mine, but the fingerprints on recent changes were careless. Lucas's so-called improvements didn't align with the original contracts. Delivery milestones had been shifted forward without corresponding disclosures. Verification steps required by compliance were marked optional. Even though the language in the agreement said otherwise, speed had been promised, but accountability had quietly vanished. From the outside, it wasn't innovation, it was exposure. I moved line by line, comparing current reports with archived baselines I had personally approved years earlier. Timestamps didn't match behavior. Actions credited to Lucas appeared before he had authority to execute them. In one case, a workflow revision was dated 3 weeks before the meeting where it was supposedly approved. Someone had rewritten time itself and hoped no one would notice. The signatures were worse. Digital approvals had been reassigned, my name replaced by departmental placeholders, then later attributed to Lucas as if consensus had existed. It was clean enough to pass a glance, sloppy enough to collapse under scrutiny. Whoever authorized it assumed internal review would never challenge the narrative. That assumption was their mistake. Independent audits don't argue, they compare. I flagged discrepancies, uploaded supporting records, and submitted them through the firm's review portal. No commentary, no conclusions, just evidence placed exactly where protocol required. The response came faster than expected. An automated notice appeared on my screen, brief and precise. Material inconsistencies detected. Investigation tier escalated. No names, no emotion, just procedure taking over. I leaned back and exhaled once. Steady and controlled. Outside the system. Influence didn't matter. Titles didn't matter. Only alignment between truth and record did. And for the first time since I had been pushed out. The process was no longer protecting the wrong people. That realization marked the moment my focus sharpened fully. Free from distraction. doubt, or misplaced loyalty again today. By the end of the week, the pattern stopped whispering and started shouting. I laid the files out in sequence, contract against report, timeline against log, and the story assembled itself without imagination. Lucas's numbers only worked if you ignored cause and effect. The efficiencies appeared where safeguards had been removed, and the savings existed only because risk had been transferred, not resolved. That wasn't strategy. It was negligence dressed up as speed. What unsettled me most was how consistent it was. Every altered timestamp pointed back to the same approval window. Every reassigned signature followed the same template. People lie in different ways. Systems don't. When the same distortion repeats, it isn't error, it's design. I didn't need to speculate about intent. The evidence carried it. Pressure followed quickly. My phone rang twice with a familiar number I hadn't saved. Then an email arrived. Polite, almost warm. Howard wrote, "Just checking in. Wanted to make sure your transition has been smooth." I read it once and closed it. Control, I've learned, often arrives disguised as concern. I didn't respond. I didn't acknowledge the call. Silence was not avoidance. It was discipline. Engaging would have given him context, and context was exactly what he was fishing for. When people sense exposure, they don't confess. They probe. By Friday afternoon, the preliminary report was ready. I reviewed it carefully, not as a participant, but as an external reader. The language was restrained, no accusations, no drama, just variance, attribution, and procedural breach. That restraint mattered. Truth doesn't need volume. I submitted the packet through the firm's secure channel and selected the required recipients. The board was on that list by default, not by my preference. Governance demands visibility, even when it's uncomfortable. As the confirmation message appeared on my screen, my chest tightened, not with fear, but with awareness. From that moment on, this was no longer personal. It was structural, and structures, once stressed in the right place, tend to fail very quickly. I stayed still, breathing slowly, knowing the next response would not come from me, but from the process. From here, the story begins to change direction. The response came sooner than I expected, and it didn't arrive quietly. An emergency board session was scheduled under the pretense of clarification, a word that usually means damage control. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. The reactions leaked fast. Howard went first. According to Mason, he leaned forward and said, "Vera left in the middle of a transition. Any inconsistencies stem from her abrupt exit." The line was clean, rehearsed, and false. He framed my resignation as abandonment, as if walking away from manipulation were the same as negligence. Lucas followed, visibly rattled. "The numbers are sound," he insisted, tapping his tablet too hard. "We optimized workflows, shortened cycles. The results speak for themselves." They didn't. He spoke faster each time someone questioned a gap, mistaking volume for certainty. When pressed about missing approvals, he blamed outdated documentation. When timelines didn't align, he called them legacy overlaps. That was when Elaine intervened. "I want the auditors present," she said. Voice level, unyielding, not summaries, not interpretations. "I want them to explain the variances directly." The room shifted. Process had replaced persuasion. And Howard felt it. He tried to soften his tone. "Elaine, this is internal. We can resolve it without." She cut him off. "We are past that." The audit firm joined by secure video. No preamble. Just slides, timestamps, and source logs. One chart stayed on the screen longer than the rest. A delivery milestone paused mid-quarter. Flagged red. "This contract cannot proceed." The auditor said. Key compliance steps were bypassed. Silence followed. Then a board member asked, "Are you saying we're exposed?" The answer was brief. Yes. The contract was suspended immediately, pending review. In that moment, the story Howard had sold began to fracture from the outside. I closed my notebook slowly, not satisfied, but certain. Cracks don't need force. They need pressure applied where the structure is already weak. I knew the meeting wouldn't end the fight, but it proved something vital once truth enters the room. Control slips, narratives unravel, and retaliation becomes desperate, sloppy, and visible to everyone watching closely. When silence finally broke, it didn't arrive as anger, it arrived as precision. Elaine Porter leaned forward, fingers folded, and asked a question so simple it cut through everything Howard had built. Who authorized the timeline changes after Vera Collins resigned? No accusation, no emotion, just placement. Howard answered too quickly. Those adjustments were procedural. He said, operations needed continuity. He kept talking, stacking explanations, filling space that hadn't been offered. I've learned that confidence pauses, panic rushes. Elaine didn't interrupt. She waited until he finished. Then asked another question. And why do the approvals route through your credentials instead of Lucas's? That was the pivot. Heads turned, screens refreshed. Someone asked for the audit slide again. Howard's voice tightened. He blamed delegation, then legacy access, then urgency. Each answer contradicted the last. Logic doesn't fail quietly, it collapses out loud. The board members stopped nodding. They started listening. Lucas tried to step in. This is being blown out of proportion, he said. The outcomes justify. Elaine cut him off without raising her voice. Outcomes don't justify breaches, she said. They conceal them. From the outside. I felt the temperature drop. Silence returned, but it had changed sides. Howard shifted in his chair, searching for control he no longer held. I recognized that moment. It's when power realizes it's no longer invisible. Elaine turned to the auditors. I want scope, she said. Individual scope. The phrase landed heavily. Howard objected. That's unnecessary. Elaine met his gaze. It's required. The vote followed quickly. No debate, no speeches. A formal investigation into Howard Beckett's conduct was approved, effective immediately. He stared at the table as if it had betrayed him. I closed my laptop slowly, steady in a way I hadn't felt in months. Silence. I realized. Isn't weakness. It's leverage. Waiting for the right question to expose everything it's been holding. It reminded me that restraint isn't passive, it's strategic. Accumulated over time, sharpened by patience, and devastating when released at the precise moment the structure demands an answer it cannot logically survive without preparation. Excuses, or witnesses to protect it. There's a reason this moment is quiet. Did you sense it? Collapse didn't arrive as a single moment. It moved. The board session continued after the vote, but the tone shifted from debate to containment. Elaine spoke first. Lucas Beckett will step back from all project authority effective immediately. The sentence landed flat. Final, Lucas protested, his voice cracking. But no one responded. His access was revoked before the meeting even ended. Howard tried to regain control. He argued process, intent, misunderstanding. Elaine stopped him mid-sentence. You are suspended pending investigation, she said. Effective now. Security protocols triggered automatically. Howard's screen went dark. The man who once narrated outcomes sat frozen, stripped of narrative entirely, from the outside. I watched compliance take over. Notifications went out to partners. Legal flagged exposure. A risk committee convened within hours. This wasn't punishment. It was triage. The company wasn't reacting to betrayal. It was reacting to liability. The real collapse followed quietly. 3 major initiatives were paused for review. A regulator requested documentation. Internal teams scrambled, suddenly unsure which processes were safe to use. Years of shortcuts revealed their cost all at once. Then something unexpected happened. The systems held. Every operational backbone I had built kept running. Redundancies activated. Fail-safes caught errors before escalation. The architecture absorbed stress exactly as designed. But when teams tried to intervene, they couldn't. Their credentials no longer reached the core layers. I didn't touch a thing. I didn't need to. Independence had rules. Access belonged to contracts now, not politics. The company could operate, but it could not override. That distinction mattered. Howard's suspension became public by morning. Lucas vanished from internal channels. Compliance briefings replaced strategy calls. What they once called progress collapsed into process. And process doesn't negotiate. I closed my notebook and stepped away from the screen. This was the peak, not because people fell, but because truth finally moved faster than influence. They were left managing consequences inside structures they no longer controlled, while the systems they dismissed continued forward without permission, apology, or sentiment. Exactly as they were built to do, Elaine asked to meet after the suspension notices settled. She chose a quiet conference room off-site, neutral and deliberate. There was no apology, only an offer framed as correction. She spoke carefully, acknowledging mistakes without naming names. I listened, calm, already certain of my answer. Elaine said the board wanted me back to stabilize operations. She emphasized trust, continuity, and a fresh start. It sounded reasonable, which is how compromise often disguises retreat. I told her I appreciated the acknowledgement. Then I declined. I didn't need to return to prove anything. My work spoke clearly now, without interference. From the outside, I had leverage and autonomy. Inside, they would always control the story. I wasn't interested in negotiating dignity. Elaine nodded, unsurprised, and closed her folder. We shook hands without ceremony. As I left, my phone buzzed again. A partner I had worked with years earlier wanted to talk. They had followed the audit closely and made a decision. Their contract would move forward with me directly. No intermediaries, no politics, no rewriting credit. I accepted without hesitation. The relief surprised me. Not triumph, not anger, just clarity. Power felt different when it didn't require permission. I no longer needed a seat at their table. Walking out, I understood what they truly lost. They lost the chance to correct quietly. They lost a system builder who protected them without applause. And they lost a future they assumed they owned. The deal finalized that evening, efficient and unmistakably final. My role was clear. My authority defined in writing. No committees, no last-minute reversals. I slept well for the first time in weeks. By morning, news traveled faster than official statements. Questions arrived that I no longer had to answer. My path was set, independent and clean. Their recovery would be slower, public, and expensive. That contrast didn't bother me. It confirmed the choice I made when I declined to return. Opportunity favors those who stop asking for permission. I moved forward, and they watched from behind. That was the offer they lost forever, and they finally understood the cost clearly. The consequences unfolded quietly, the way real justice usually does. Howard Beckett didn't give a farewell speech or a defiant interview. His suspension turned into a termination, then into absence. Emails stopped. Calendars erased him. Within weeks, his name became something people avoided saying aloud, as if it carried liability on its own. Lucas vanished even faster. Recruiters went silent. Speaking invitations disappeared. In an industry that runs on reputation, he learned the difference between visibility and credibility. There was no announcement, just a slow, unmistakable disappearance from rooms he once assumed were guaranteed. The company survived. Technically, systems held. Contracts limped forward. Compliance tightened its grip, but control was gone. Decisions now moved through external frameworks I helped design, governed by terms no executive could bend. They could operate, but they could not improvise. Their future belonged to structures, not personalities. I watched all of this from a distance that felt earned. No gloating, no victory lap. Satisfaction doesn't need witnesses. What mattered was that the truth stayed intact long enough to do its work. I closed the final file, forwarded nothing, explained nothing. My role was complete the moment I stopped protecting people who refused to protect reality. Walking away felt lighter than winning ever had. I didn't rebuild what they lost. I built something separate, durable, and mine. The company would continue, but never the way it once imagined. That difference was enough. Nothing more required. I didn't cause their collapse. I simply stopped holding them upright. I learned something simple from all of this. Something no boardroom ever teaches you. Your value isn't proven by how loudly you defend yourself, but by how solid your work remains when you step away. When the noise faded, what mattered were the systems that still stood, the truth that didn't need my voice to survive. That realization didn't feel like revenge. It felt like relief, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for too long. If you stayed with me all the way to the end. Thank you, truly. I'd love to know, did this story resonate with you? Where are you listening from right now? Take a moment and share your thoughts below. If the story meant something to you, a like or a comment helps more than you might think. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, told calmly and honestly, subscribing is a quiet way to stay connected. I appreciate you being here.